Dave here at Albion, and I'm delighted to welcome Ashley Montanaro, co-founder of Phasecraft. Welcome.
Hi Dave, it's great to be here.
So Phasecraft was founded in 2018 as a spin-out from both UCL and the University of Bristol. Professor Ashley Montanaro, Professor Toby Cubitt, and Professor John Morton are three co-founders, each of whom have been at the cutting edge of quantum research for the last couple of decades. In 2023, you raised a Series A, £13 million, led by Playground Global, participation from Albion and your existing investors, UCL Technology Fund, Episode 1, Parkwalk Advisors, and others. So total funding raised to date in £20 million, including grants. And you have been at the forefront of changing the paradigm of quantum computing and bringing quantum computing closer than ever before. Could you tell us a little bit about Phasecraft?
Sure. First, thanks very much for those kind words. So Phasecraft is a quantum algorithms company. So what that means is that we develop algorithms for quantum computers. So quantum computers are these amazing devices that use the principles of quantum mechanics to do things that just can't be done by any standard or what we call classical computer that's based only on the laws of classical physics. So the sort of laws of physics that were known to Newton, that the familiar ones that we've built all the computers on over the last, best part of 100 years. Quantum computing is a new paradigm that goes beyond that. And one of the reasons why it's so exciting is that quantum computers will be able to solve some incredibly important challenges which currently are beyond the capacity of even the world's top HPC systems. So these include things like modeling batteries, modeling solar cells, a number of these different sort of clean energy technologies which we would dearly love to have, but which we can't model sufficiently accurately using our standard classical technologies. But in order to make this a reality in the near term, let's say the next few years rather than the next 10 or 20 years, it's critical to develop incredibly efficient quantum algorithms. And that's what Phasecraft is trying to do. And we've built up a team of about 25 people over the last 5 years or so, based in Bristol and London, a team of scientists, researchers, engineers that are all working towards this goal of achieving advantage using quantum computers over classical computers for problems like modeling battery materials and solar cells.
Great. So we first met back in 2017, in fact, when you and Toby and John were first contemplating Phasecraft. Over the last 6 years or so, I've had the pleasure of watching you sort of develop from world-leading academics to entrepreneurial founders of a business and business leaders. How would you describe your own personal development through the journey with Phasecraft?
Well, it's been an incredibly exciting time. I think when we first started out with Phasecraft, so it was a really exciting time for the field of quantum computing. It was clear that this technology was going out of the lab and into the real world, and we really thought it was the right time to capitalize on this and to move somewhat into the commercial world. But this was really a bit of a departure for us because for me, for example, I've been working in academia for sort of 15 or so years at that point, and it was not obvious how it was going to go. And I think it's been incredibly sort of interesting as a sort of learning process, trying to understand the sort of differences and perhaps also the similarities associated with running a company rather than running an academic group. So I think this has really helped all of us to develop personally and develop a whole bunch of new skills that perhaps we didn't know we had before.
And if you were to go back and coach the 2017 version of you and Toby in particular, what would you be advising them? How would you be coaching them?
Okay, so I think just one bit of advice that I would probably give my sort of previous self at that time is I think that sort of moment when you're setting up a company, it can be kind of stressful. There are a lot of things going on. You're entering this new world you don't really understand, and sometimes it can be sort of unclear what's sort of important and what's less important. And I think advice I give my former self is that there may be a lot of things which at the time feel very important, but in the long run turn out not to be so critical. So I think I would advise my former self, and I guess other founders, to try to worry a bit less perhaps about the way things are going. There are obviously some things which are sort of really pivotal in the founding of a company that you want to get right, but there's other things where, it really doesn't matter so much. And if you want your company to be around for the long term, there are also things that you can just change later on. So I think that's a key bit of advice I would give.
Good. Well, I like that advice for founders. Just worry a little less, just relax. I think that's really important, and something we see is high levels of stress across founding teams. So very sage advice, and I hope you can follow your own advice.
Well, I do my best.
Of the journeys. And how you've talked about sort of the difference. How also does your time in academia prepare you to be a co-founder and a leader of a startup?
So something that I think I had not quite appreciated at the time, but eventually I did, is that there are actually a lot of the skills that you develop in academia which turn out to be very relevant to being a startup founder. So this is especially true if you end up in academia, perhaps with a faculty position, running a group and so on. So firstly, in academia, you are sort of constantly presenting your work. You're giving talks, you're giving lectures, you're working with students in sort of project presentations and so on. And I think these are incredibly useful experience for actually presenting your work as a founder, for perhaps raising money or just talking about what you've done. And I would say as well, you are in academia generally building up a team of more junior people and working with them, trying to bring them on, and realizing that it's not just about you, it's also about their success as well. So I think those are also important aspects. And I think as well as this, there's also the sort of organization and time management aspect, because in academia, famously, people sort of work all of the time. They don't have enough time to do all the things they want to do. And that is definitely good preparation, I would say, for starting a company, especially because you have many different kinds of activities that you're trying to do, as well as the sort of core R&D. You're having to sort of interface with lots of people in lots of different areas to do things, ranging from sort of marketing to finance to all of these other things and running a company. And I think that the sort of multifaceted nature of academia can be great preparation for that too.
Yeah, interesting. So you're talking about sort of presenting your work as an academic. How is pitching different then from sort of presenting your latest results?
I think one key aspect, and this is something where certainly we benefited from some coaching from our investors and other mentors at that time. One key aspect is the level of optimism, to be honest. I think in academia, people are sort of rightfully, very sort of scientifically rigorous and always sort of thinking about, okay, this is a way that something could go wrong. This is a way that the results are not as good as one might think. This, 5 years' time, maybe, this is not going to be the way forward, and so on. Whereas in business, people are much more optimistic about the future. And I think that this is something where, you just have to recalibrate yourself a bit. So I think coming from academia and, still try to ground everything you say in some level of rigor, but just try to think optimistically and think, well, things might go really well in 5 years' time. And, it's not ruled out that we could do some really great stuff later on. Yeah,
that's really interesting. So I think when we first met, that's how I sort of calibrated you in my mind. I was like, wow, these guys don't hype. They give it to me absolutely straight. Whereas the rest of the sort of quantum world at that time, there was a lot of hype in it. And I really felt very comfortable actually with both talking to you as co-founders, because it never felt like there was hype coming. It was always like a very rational, conservative in some ways view of the world, but with this incredible promise of being able to do something amazing. So interesting to hear you sort of reflect on that as well. Actually, thinking back to that time, so at Albion, we had the pleasure through the UCL Technology Fund of leading your first round. And actually, we supported the company in every round since. And AlbionVC is also now an investor through its venture capital trusts. How has it helped to have that UCL Technology Fund embedded at UCL as part of the ecosystem for Phasecraft?
So first, we are incredibly grateful for the support that Albion's shown us over the years through these various sort of forms, and obviously the support that you personally have shown for the company. And I think that for us, one thing that was very valuable in these sort of very early stages of Phasecraft was working with investors that really understood what it was like to have a sort of academically based UK sort of startup / spin out. And who understood the ecosystem, who were sort of really embedded within it, and also, frankly, were able to interface with the university as well, sort of directly, which I think can be incredibly helpful, just to have this sort of line of communication perhaps that you don't necessarily have with a sort of external VC fund. So I think for us this was very helpful indeed, and I think it's a really interesting model for sort of other investments, other funds as well.
Yeah, great. Well, I mean, it's been an incredibly big privilege to be part of the journey, and a pleasure working with you all the way through. So, thank you for that. And today, Phasecraft has sort of done a whole load of research as a corporate body. So I think I've got here 17 scientific papers. You've reduced the time or the need for quantum hardware sort of volume down by many orders of magnitude. To what extent has been doing research within a company been different to research in academia, and how would you describe that difference?
So that's a great question. So I think what we try to do in Phasecraft is take all of the best bits of research in academia, but improve on them and execute them in a startup context. And so, for example, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to do research which is at the cutting edge of what's being done worldwide. So it's presented at the top academic conferences, it's published in the top academic journals. But on the other hand, we aim to work at a speed which is more commensurate with a startup than with the traditional speed of academia. So we are really aiming to work fast and get results out as soon as possible, and also to work on things which are genuinely practically applicable, that are not just sort of maybe a fun sort of academic theoretical question, but one which is unlikely to lead to any sort of practical advance anytime soon. So, for example, in academia, is often the case that you're working on some project and you realise that a certain technique is not going to work very well, and then the traditional thing to do might be to spend a month trying to prove that it doesn't work very well, and maybe do some maths or something like this and get some theorems out that say, okay, this here are some limitations on the power of this technique. Whereas what we try to do in Phasecraft is just get some sort of initial sort of indication, some sort of numerical evidence maybe that the technique is not working, and then just say, okay, that's fine, we're done with that, we're going to move on, we're going to do something now that actually works. And I think this can be very effective in actually getting to the results you want to get to a lot faster.
Okay, so in essence, the kind of speed up that you see comes from kind of a results or an applied results driven focus. Is that right?
So it's that, and also a critical point is in a startup you have the ability to put together a team with a variety of different skills within it, which for me actually has been one of the nicest things about working in a startup, that we now have a team that has sort of quantum algorithms designers, materials scientists, sort of chemists, coders, like mathematicians all the way through to people who really focus on engineering and implementation, or running on quantum hardware. And I think putting together this kind of interdisciplinary team is quite a challenge in academia, actually, because you have to find research grants that pay for people, and if you're a material scientist, you don't necessarily want to have a job in a maths department. And I think by bringing together this kind of team, it's actually the only way that you can solve some of these really big and challenging problems which are crossing disciplinary boundaries.
Got it. And then on the team, it's been evident to me actually right from the start that there's been a very strong focus on culture and creating a culture within Phasecraft that has all of the elements of a compassionate but results-driven organisation. Why do you believe that creating a strong culture is so critical, and how have you gone about it at Phasecraft?
Right, so I think it is incredibly important, I would say, for any company to have a supportive environment where people just want to work, because I think it's the easiest way to get the best people. But I think this is especially true in a field like quantum computing, where actually there is a huge amount of competition for talent, and people have the ability to work in many different companies. I think it's incredibly important to have a sort of really appealing place to work where people are happy to go into the office every day. I mean, that's the let's say the sort of practical reason why you might want to do this, but I think there's also a sort of moral reason that I think we just want to build a company that is a good place to work and is a place where people are happy. And I think that there are sort of a number of different ways where we have deliberately sort of tried to engineer this. So, firstly, this may be something we discuss more later. I mean, Phasecraft has got quite a sort of family-oriented feel to it. I mean, the founders all have young children. A number of our team have had kids during the time that Phasecraft has been around. That really leads to a particular sort of atmosphere within the company where people realise that that it's okay to sort of leave early on some day because they need to pick up their child from childcare or whatever, and they can do the work they need to do another time. We have some sort of a lot of flexibility there, and we have a general sort of let's say sort of flexible and sort of compassionate culture, and I think so as well as that, I think it's just having a sort of overall let's say tolerant and flexible view of how we work with our team, and if somebody needs to take some time off for a dentist appointment or whatever, then that's absolutely fine. I think it absolutely pays off in the long run because I think our team are very sort of committed, and I think we're finding that they do go above and beyond what they need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back in 2017, actually, one of the first things when I was doing my background research on you all, I remember I read a blog that Toby had put out about taking full paternity leave and what that meant and how it was the right thing to do. And actually, I found that very inspiring. I think the world has shifted very much towards the values that you set within Phasecraft from the beginning around things like paternity leave and ensuring people have time for their families. So. In some sense, I see you guys as leaders in that space, which is great.
And I mean, a particular thing we put in place on that front is our parental leave policy, which is 6 months full paid gender blind, which several of our team have taken up since we started, and I think we're very proud of that, and we hope that's something that more companies do take up. Yeah,
it's super inspiring. I'm really impressed by it, and it's something that other companies are doing now, but I really feel like you guys were ahead of the curve, and that's something to be super proud of. And the other thing, actually, thinking about you and Toby, you have such high levels of mutual respect for each other. I think it comes from just mutual respect of each other's work to start with. How has your relationship together evolved as you've kind of built this company as sort of CTO and CEO?
So when we started Phasecraft, Toby and I have known each other for a pretty long time, and we've worked together on a number of scientific projects, but we hadn't built anything as sort of big and complex as Phasecraft together, and I think that's definitely been a learning process. So I think we've spent a lot of time discussing over the last few years. I mean, if you look back for our Slack history, I don't know how many words it would be, but probably a sort of book length or so. And I think I think that point you made about sort of mutual respect is very important. And just when you are founders and you're running a company, obviously you're not going to agree on everything, and there are always going to be things where you have a difference of opinion, which is very healthy, to be honest. I think it would be very worrying if you had two founders of a company that really did agree on absolutely everything. And I think it's just critical to be able to discuss things through in a sort of very calm way, and sort of realise the other person is sort of also wanting the best for the company and for everybody. And I'd say that one way in which our relationship has kind of evolved over the years is that as Phasecraft has got bigger and as it's less and less possible for one person or even two people to understand everything about what's going on, we've sort of inevitably had to divide up the responsibilities a bit about what we're doing within the company. So as you mentioned, Toby's now taken on the role of CTO and Chief Science Officer, who's sort of responsible for really enabling us to deliver some absolutely fantastic science and technology. Whereas I'm, doing the CEO role, which means I'm sort of more involved with things like fundraising and many other aspects of sort of making the company work. And I think that this is something that's been incredibly valuable because it's enabled us to, to not have to duplicate all of the work and to sort of just realise that the other person is going to be doing certain things so that we don't have to do it ourselves.
Cool, excellent. And thinking about influential people in the company. Ian Hogarth came in as chair after your first funding round. He's the chair of the UK's AI Foundational Model Task Force. He's well known in the startup community. How important has his influence been on you?
So Ian has been fantastic on the team. From day one, I think he's been incredibly helpful at sort of enabling us to articulate and even sort of form the strategy for the company, and in particular the sort of messaging in our sort of various fundraisers. He's been really pivotal in shaping that and helping us to understand perhaps why, from an outsider's point of view, what we're doing seems so exciting, and how to sort of optimize that level of excitement. And yeah, I think it's been sort of almost essential, to be honest, to have someone like him on the board and on the team as an independent chair who is a sort of sounding board for many of the questions that we might have. And I think it's brilliant that he's been recognised by this role for the UK government. I think it's very well deserved, and I think I'm looking forward to working with him for the future as well.
Yeah, and on mentors and advisors, who else has been sort of influential in your journey through to being CEO of Phasecraft and raising lots of money and doing amazing things?
Right, so I think it's sort of interesting because at the time that we founded Phasecraft, I mean, actually I didn't really have any sort of mentors or people that had a similar journey. I mean, there were my peers, obviously. John, my co-founder, he'd had 2 startups before, which is fantastic, and that was incredibly useful. But it wasn't like there was someone there who's maybe 20 years on from me that I was able to chat to. So since we've started Phasecraft, there have been a few people who have really helped us in terms of giving up some of their time, giving us great advice. So these include our angel investors, where we have this amazing array of people. I'm not going to sort of pick out any of them because there's quite a few. And I would also name, as well as our current and previous sort of board directors, I will also particularly pick out Karina Namir, who was a board observer for Phasecraft with episode 1 and is now still working with us as an advisor, because I think that having some source of external advice beyond your own board, I think is very, very useful. And I think also Karina brings a wealth of experience from her own previous time as a founder and a CEO of a deep tech company. So I think I would definitely encourage other founders to try to find people who are maybe a sort of bit external to your company, a bit sort of separate, but who have had this sort of founding experience and have gone through this process.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, I've seen the positive impact that Karina's had on the company too, so that's great to call it out. Back to the kind of family stuff. I mean, you have a young family, and you have commitments with the university still as well. So a lot going on. How do you maintain that kind of work-life balance? How do you ensure that you don't burn out? What's your strategies that you would share with other people?
So I'd say this is something that's definitely a work in progress for me. But I would say a few things. So firstly, sort of back to the previous topic, I think it's almost essential, if you want to sort of combine family life with startup life, to ensure that you have a culture in place which enables you to do that. So, for example, in my case, like at the end of every day, I normally do pick up from childcare, and I sort of do kids' dinner and bedtime and so on, which means that I'm generally not able to have meetings and so on between, let's say, 5 o'clock and sort of 8 o'clock, unless there's something really urgent. And that's fine. Everyone accepts that. Sometimes I have meetings like later on in the evening to talk to someone in the US or whatever, and that's something I'm happy to do. And I think that we've built a culture in the company where that's just fine. That's something that people accept, and that everyone has their own different constraints they're trying to fit together. So I think that's sort of very, very important. I would say also, sort of at a personal level, you have to sort of compartmentalize to some extent, and I think sort of accept, okay, for certain time periods, okay, you're not able to do X because you're doing sort of Y instead. I would say as well, just accept that that there may be some things that you're not able to do if you want to take some amount of time to be with your family and another amount of time to be with the company. So, for example, for me, it's certainly true I don't have a huge amount of time for sort of hobbies or other sort of external stuff because that time's just taken up with other things. And again, that's fine. I think it's ultimately a question of prioritization and choosing what balance is right for you.
Yeah, no, I've certainly felt that. I think we both have young families, actually. And I think we both disturbed each other's children's bedtimes once or twice, and it's always felt very respectful. Like, actually, I've got my child's bedtime. Can we call back? And it's I always felt the freedom from you to do that, and likewise. So, it's nice to operate with founders with that culture when that culture enables me to look after my family well too.
Right. I think that's true because it's not just about you yourself as a founder or within your own company. You sort of have to realise you're interfacing with lots of other people as well, and many people have sort of complicated jigsaws to put together. So I think it's a really good thing that the sort of culture of the community as a whole, I think, has definitely become very tolerant and accepting of this. Yeah,
which is great. Absolutely great. So back onto the business, the promise of quantum computers has been around for a while. There has been a lot of hype. I mean, back in 2017 when we first met, it seemed like it was bubbling up. You've been researching it now for, like I say, 20 years.
20 years.
Why is now the time? Like, what's driving it?
So I would say there's a few things. So firstly, we have certainly seen, as we've discussed, that quantum computing is marked by these sort of hype cycles where you go through, intense excitement followed by, sort of level of pessimism, and this sort of repeats. And in fact, I've been in the field for long enough to have been through multiple such cycles already. And I think that at the moment we're sort of transitioning from a brief period of extreme levels of hype and excitement to maybe a sort of higher level of realism. And I think that what we've seen recently, or what reason why this is now a great time to be in quantum computing, is firstly the developments on the hardware side. I think we've seen steady progress over recent years from a number of different big players on the quantum hardware front, and I think that's critically important to be able to do something useful with these machines. I mean, we always say we're in the sort of 1940s, 1950s era equivalent of quantum computing, and so it's crucial that the hardware does continue to improve. So that's one aspect, but I think another aspect is basically the fantastic developments we've been able to make on the algorithm side. I mean, we've managed to reduce the complexity of certain key problems in materials modeling by literally millions, factors of millions, and we are just getting more and more confident and excited that you will be able to do something in the near term with these machines. So that's why I think many companies who are sort of end users for the applications of quantum computing, why they're getting excited and getting involved in this area, because they can see actually it's not going to be that long before quantum computing is useful for them.
Yeah, I mean, that's been a mark of Phasecraft from the start. Like I said, you were kind of the antithesis to the hype back in 2018, 2017, and yet your view has been quite steady and just a slow confidence build, quiet confidence rather than kind of hype cycles, and you've kind of been the, as I say, the antithesis to the industry. So it's nice to hear the kind of measured view still, but the real excitement now growing at Phasecraft because of your achievements built on real success. It's quite something. So last year you raised £13 million. What's 2024 got? How are you going to take that and use it, and what's your plans to grow, and what will Phasecraft be doing in a year or two's time?
Right. So indeed, last year it was a very exciting time that we closed our Series A funding round, which has really enabled us to sort of grow and support the team and continue to make fantastic progress on our sort of R&D directions we're looking for. So there are really a couple of key things I would say we're trying to achieve in the near term. One of them is getting to this absolutely essential milestone of quantum advantage. So quantum computing solving a problem which is beyond the capacity of standard classical computing, and is a sort of interesting problem in itself, rather than a problem that's just designed to make the quantum computer look good, which is a milestone that's already been achieved, the so-called quantum supremacy. So for us, this is really important to get to, and it's something that indeed we're working towards right now with a number of different experiments. And I would say as well, we have this new direction which we're very excited by, where we have hybrid quantum classical algorithms. So these are quantum algorithms which sort of tap into a existing classical workflow, and they improve it and overcome the limitations of those classical algorithms. So this provides a way of bringing the timescale down for getting to practical quantum advantage, because the quantum algorithms, even at a sort of early stage, we have sort of very noisy, very limited quantum computers, they're still going to be able to improve those classical algorithms that exist. So it's a more gradual process, rather than this needing to wait for this kind of step change where we get to this sort of big bang of quantum advantage. So that's a direction we're very excited by, and we're going to be pushing that a lot further.
So it sounds like we're going to see real world impacts from Phasecraft in the very near future.
We think so.
Streams.
We think so.
Yeah, very exciting. So I'll finish with a question which is very much related to the kind of university spin-out world. If you had to sort of design the recipe for a successful research-based university spin-out like Phasecraft, what were the ingredients that you would put in? Okay,
so I would say, it may be obvious, but I would say the role of the founder or founders is absolutely pivotal. And I think no matter, all of the other pieces could be in place, but if you don't have someone who is a sort of capable and enthusiastic founder, then nothing else is going to work. And there are many cases where there's some amazing technology at a university, but actually there just isn't an appropriate person to take that forward. And I think that that is fundamental. But I would say beyond that, there are some sort of structural aspects which are important as well. I think if we're thinking about a university sort of startup where the university somehow plays some role, and it's not like, let's say, the academic quits to found their startup, then I think just having that level of support from the university is key. And I think we've seen that universities are not monolithic, and there may be one department in a university that's very supportive of startups, another one is sort of less so. And I think having that sort of local enthusiasm and support from the academics as well as the sort of technology transfer people, I think is essential. So there are let's say some heads of department who may be worrying, okay, if this academic does their startup, they're not going to be so available to teach next year, what am I going to do about that? And there are others which are sort of less concerned about that, and they can really see the opportunities that are going to accrue to the university because of this sort of industrial link. So I think that's essential, and I think as well as the access to funding, which is essential for any startup, perhaps particularly challenging for some university startups and spin-outs. I would say also that sort of external advice, I think, is very important too. And a lot of this can come from the sort of investors themselves, but I think it's also very valuable to have that sort of mentoring, to have someone else with no skin in the game that that is able to provide some kind of advice to the startup. And for me, actually, on occasion this has happened, that someone who's an academic who's thinking of starting a company has had a chat with me, and I've been able to pass on some insight which hopefully is useful to them. And I think that for academics that are entering this area, it can actually be a very opaque process. There's generally very little information available. It's a bit lots of stuff sort of behind closed doors. So I think the more that this kind of thing can be out in the open, and the more information is available, the better, really.
Perfect. Well, it's been such an exciting journey to be on. It's been a privilege to be part of it. Very, very excited to see how it unfolds over the next few years and be part of the journey with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, likewise, thanks again so much for your support, and very much looking forward to the next 5+ years as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.